Hey fellow Tamers and Digi-Destined, it's Mike AKA Synaku from OverGround, and we're coming back at you guys again with a new deck profile video. And the point of this deck profile is the following question. Are you sick of losing to that red-yellow security McDonald's deck, whatever the heck you want to call it? It's been kind of coming out of the woodwork. You see it everywhere now, and it is just a beast. For those unfamiliar, this is the deck where it uses a lot of recovery mechanics and engines to kind of constantly put cards into their security, so that way their security is always going to be some insane form of removal that will always deal with your board in every single capacity, and then they slowly just start chipping away at your life while constantly maintaining advantage through you actually attacking. So you're actually getting punished for playing the game, which is kind of this weird version of Digimon that we actually haven't quite seen before. I actually had a deck on the channel built back in 1.0 format that used a Megazoo engine with the Yellow Angels as kind of a base, and it had a similar end game to it. The difference is that as of 1.5, there are so much more removal option cards and so many better ways to deal with opponents' threats, as well as with the security Digimon as well from 1.5, that make the recovering and putting things into your security that much more potent and that much more dangerous. So I sat down with a couple of my buddies and we said, well, what can beat this sort of deck, and what can we do to try to make sure that we're not getting blown out by these insane options just by attacking into them? And we came across WarGreymon here as our solution. Now, there is a card in 1.5 called a Faint Plan, which has the same effect as this WarGreymon, but in option form, and it costs 1 memory. For those unfamiliar with this WarGreymon, this is from BT1 and 1.0, and this WarGreymon is when it declares an attack, no options will trigger. And on Digivolution, the turn that it Digivolved, it gets security attack +1. Now, you combo that with any other cards in the deck that increase its security checks, you can potentially swing in for security attack plus, 2, 3, 4, clean out your opponent's security stack, and make sure that they don't trigger any of those options, meaning that all of that recovery that they're getting, they're not going to get any actual value out of the cards that they're throwing in there. And so that's what the purpose of this deck was, and it was just kind of a way to metagame against that deck, and as well as metagame against other decks that have very strong options in security, who kind of rely on those options in security to kind of stay in the game, as well as advance their own board state and advance their own advantage. And so this is also very good against something like Rookie Rush, for example, because Rookie Rush relies on things like, Hammer Spark, Positron Laser. It also allows them to get things like We Have to Stop Fighting to their hand if you check that in security, which is can be like a blowout card depending on the circumstances. So we wanted to build a deck because want to build a deck that can counter those two decks specifically, Rookie Rush and the Red Yellow Security, because they're kind of gaining in popularity, and they're kind of overtaking the majority shares of what we see in average tournaments as days and weeks go by. So this is kind of built as a catch-all counter to those two decks specifically. However, it's still built to be a functional red Omni deck as a side strategy, and you can use that side strategy towards any other matchups that you otherwise would have gone up against that it's not meant to just completely annihilate. So I'm going to go into the deck list real quick. I'm not going to talk too much about the card choices because these are all cards that you've likely seen a million times before in probably a million other red decks, and there's not anything here that's overly spicy or overly techy. The deck is very, very straightforward, and it's very, very linear. And so because we wanted the deck to have such a clear-cut focus in WarGreymon, as well as having alternative win conditions through other matchups, we just made the deck to be as simple to play and as simple to build as possible. So there's not a lot of lines of play here. It's pretty much always the same. And in that vein, you're going to notice that the rookie lineup is generally identical to any rookie lineup you'd see in a red deck. So we're going to start with the 4 promo Greymon, and this is specifically to complement the WarGreymon because we can make it 13,000, and in certain matchups where you could be capping out at like a 12,000 plus, having WarGreymon with this Agumon allows you to go through your opponent's security a little bit faster and a little bit cleaner. Then when you got the 4 Agumon here, which is plus 1,000 inheritable, this is standard in pretty much any flavor of red, 4 Monodramon, and then 2 Biomon. Now, the big change, I guess, in this deck compared to modern red decks is that we're not playing the Memory Gainer Biomon, which is the 3 cost on attack. If it's your turn when she gets deleted, you get to gain 1 memory. And that's because we're also seeing a rise of yellow decks in the format. And I'm finding that, especially against Shine Greymon, this Biomon does literally nothing. Because when I'm attacking into my opponent and I hit a Tamer, that Biomon survives. And I'm not getting any value out of it, so I'm not actually gaining that additional memory to further advance my plays if necessary. And I found that in a format specifically now where we're seeing this red yellow security, if I'm expecting to go up against it more often, my opponent's going to be giving me a ton of memory every turn anyway, so I don't actually need to worry about getting that additional memory with Biomon. And having extra 2 costs in the deck means that I can actually play up an entire stack from scratch with a 2-cost and just kind of go up the range instead of having to worry about putting something directly into my raising area. This choice was meant to kind of increase the speed of the deck, not necessarily the versatility. And that's because we're also playing 2 copies of tie, which I'm just going to talk about real quick. And this is the memory setting tie that puts us to 3 every turn. That's because 9 times out of 10, we just kind of want to make sure that we can set up an ultimate, have tie on board, and that way as soon as our turn rolls back around, we go to 3, we bring up our ultimate, we can pop down this WarGreymon. He'll have security attack +1, +2 with tie, +3 if we have another tie in play, plus more if we end up having a Greymon in the mix anywhere like that. And that just gives us one very powerful turn to just kind of plow through our opponent's security and try to annihilate them at least 1 turn or more. Generally, in a deck like this, you can destroy Rookie Rush as well as destroy the red yellow security deck in about 2 swings. So you have to time your WarGreymon very, very well. But that just ties into the discussion about the rookies and why we're playing such a heavier 2-cost lineup, as well as just a thinner lineup in general, and kind of avoiding some of those new, more popular trends. Onto the champion lineup. This is probably literally the same champion lineup I built in every single red deck up to this point. We got the 4 Dr. the 4 Quadramon, and the 3 Greymon. Now, there is an argument right now to either swap 1 Quadramon or 1 Dark Tyrannomon for a 4th copy of Greymon. And this is to increase the chance and probability that you can get this WarGreymon on a stack that has this Greymon as well. So the end game here is ideally you'll be swinging with this WarGreymon with this Greymon and at least 1 tie. So this gives you security attack +3. So that means you're going to be doing 4 checks. If you can get this second tie in play, you're going to be doing security attack +4, which means you're actually going to be wiping out your opponent's entire stack, not barring any extra recovery that they might have done. But generally speaking, if you're going to be hitting for 4 checks, let's say they've recovered maybe once or twice, that already puts them down to 2 security left, and that means on the next turn, you can wipe them out with WarGreymon and just need 1 more attack to finish the game off. However, 3 Greymon I think is fine right now. Having the Dark Tyrannomon to complement the ultimate lineup, which we'll talk about real soon, helps with the turbo aspect of the deck and helps us get into our megas a lot faster, which I still kind of like Dark Tyrannomon a little bit more in that respect because he gives us that turbo capability, but I can't deny the aggressiveness that this Greymon can bring. So I'm still trying to find ways and tinker with this deck to find a way in which I could cut an extra card for this 4th Greymon. If you guys have any comments or suggestions in the comments below on how we could squeeze this 4th Greymon in, please let me know. Now, moving on to the ultimates. Again, it's just a very lean, very, linear lineup. We're just going to play 4 Groundramon, 4 LavaGreymon. We just want the highest amount of consistency as possible for 2-cost evolutions, so we can just keep turboing into our plays as consistently and as often as possible. And with 4 Groundramon, because he's a 5-cost, we can generally just hard drop him pretty much turn 1. If we have a tie in play backing him up, that means our WarGreymon is going to be live as soon as the next turn rolls around, and we don't have to worry about any actual evolution shenanigans. We wanted to build the deck to just be as consistent as possible without relying on any extra excess text. For one draft, at one point we were playing the Secret Rare Metal Greymon, but we found that the more 3-cost evolutions we had in the deck, the harder it was to actually combo off, so that's why we went back to just the solid 8 2-cost evolutions. Now we're going to go to our megas. Now we've talked about WarGreymon a bunch, and you're going to notice that we only play 3 copies. That's because we still wanted to max out the 4 copies of Phoenixmon for matchups that aren't what this deck is designed to defeat. So in this instance, 4 Phoenixmon ties into the actual solid quote-unquote red Omni plan, which is why we still run a max 8 copies of the 2-cost evolutions along with Dark Tyrannomon, because worst case scenario, and we're not playing against the matchup that we're designed to metagame to beat, we can still play this as a solid straight red Omni deck, so we still have the entire red Omni turbo components to do that instead. And Phoenixmon ties together into that strategy as well as a 2-cost mega that we can just drop down really early on, and that allows us to put immediate pressure to threaten an Omnimon play. So now we're going to play the 3 WarGreymon. We've already talked about him. We're going to skip over. We don't want to play 4 WarGreymon, again, just because in matchups where it isn't necessary, having multiples can brick. It's not a bad card by any means, but having the 3-cost evolution is sometimes a little awkward, and getting his DP up into areas where he can't be run over is a little bit trickier, and we're in a format with Imperial Dramons everywhere. Attacking with him and not finishing out the game, and you don't have an Omnimon to follow up, means that your opponent can just eat him up with an Imperial Dramon on the back crack. Whereas opposed with a Phoenixmon, if they do have an Imperial Dramon in play, they would have to be forced to crash. So, just thinking kind of outside the box and kind of preparing yourself for other matchups and stuff like that. Now, I know that we said that we built this deck to beat Rookie Rush, and yet we're only playing 1 Volcanic Dramon. Why is that? The reason is that we're still playing 2 copies of Ultra-S. And against Rookie Rush, you can generally just kind of throw down a Mega. Like, if you open with Phoenixmon, you can just drop Phoenixmon, put them to like 10. And what are they going to do? They're going to extend their entire hand to try to put a bunch of rookies, try to, go for games, threaten a game shot, and then you're just going to respond with an Ultra-S on top, wipe out everything that they've ever loved and cared about, and you're just set up for the majority of the game. So I found that Volk in general just doesn't do as much as he used to. We have introduction of cards like OverGround now that are 5,000, and Volcanic Digimon just can't hit that. A lot of more Rookie Rush decks are still playing that Champion Rush strategy as well, so we're still seeing things like Gorillamon. Some decks that are playing more green cards are also playing Vegemon as well, and Volcanic Digimon just can't hit those. And whereas Omnimon Ultra S actually can, because not only can it destroy OverGround with the 5,000 threshold already, because it de-digivolves one, it'll automatically knock off every champion that they already have in play and then destroy the rookie underneath. So Ultra S is kind of like the new age of Volk. It requires a bit more setup, but it's kind of more rewarding overall at the end of the day. On top of that, cards that just give your opponent a ton of memory in this format, I'm trying to avoid playing, because I'm finding that these 11 drops are not as valuable as they used to be in 1.0. There are so many more cards in 1.5 that can respond to such a giant swing in memory tempo, and they can punish you for it tremendously. So having multiple copies of Volcanic Digimon, while still powerful in his own right, I did not feel was necessary, and I just wanted to play the one for the niche scenario where he could come up where I did not have access to an Ultra. And finally, we're going to round off our Digimon card with the Omni package. So again, like I said, we are playing kind of red Omni side strategy, so to speak, which is why the Omni package itself is pretty thin. Normally you would play 3 of one Omni and 2 of another. In this case, just for deck space, in order to kind of include other cards, we're cutting it down to a 2-2 split. The Omnis are pretty much, you'll draw them if you need them, but if you don't need them, they're not going to clog your hand, and you can potentially draw into other cards that are more relevant to specific matchups. So you just kind of play your deck normally. If you can hit an Omnimon, great. If not, you generally won't need it because you have other ways of removal and you have other ways to deal with your opponent's board and your opponent's security. And then we talked about Tai already. Tai, friend familiar, gives security attack +1 if you have a full red stack. And then to round off the deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Gaia Force. This is because normally I would have cut Gaia Force down to 2 because the space in this deck is so tight ever since the introduction of Ultra S kind of came in. But I found that Gaia Force is still powerful enough because I want to have more cards in my personal security to help deal with my opponent's threats, again, matchup dependent. If I find that 3 Gaia Force is a little bit too bricky and then I'm kind of dealing with my opponent's stuff without necessarily needing it, I could potentially cut it down to 2 and then make that space used for either another Omnimon or maybe another Volk, depending on how the meta kind of rounds itself out over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, this is the how to beat red-yellow security. Oh, I guess I didn't talk about the babies real quick. So we're playing 4 Koromon and 1 Gigimon. And the reason we're playing 4 Koromon is because this deck generally wants to sit in the raising area while you're setting up the WarGreymon play. So that means no matter what happens, your WarGreymon's going to come out with that 1,000 boost because you don't have to worry about playing through the game to constantly hit Gigimon's activation requirements. So as soon as you move out of the raising area, it's going to be a full stack, so you're going to satisfy Koromon's requirements. And that's why we're just playing Koromon and 1 Gigimon as opposed to 4 one of the other ways split. So yeah, that is the deck. If you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you feel that there might be another way to build this deck, if you've tried something similar and you have other suggestions that you want to add to it, let me know. If you like what you see here and what we do at the OverGround, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video to let me know that you enjoyed the content that you watched today. So I have been Mike, aka Synaku, and I will see you guys in the next one.